Welcome to Leadership Talk, the official Waymaker podcast, where we explore how your organization can achieve more by doing less.
Hello and welcome to a special episode, guest episode of Leadership Talk from Waymaker. And it's a real blessing and privilege to have Colin Smith with me today. Colin, welcome to Leadership Talk.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, Colin, we actually met a little while ago and we had a great conversation. I was intrigued by your skills and expertise, and you're an expert in listening. Well, actually, before I talk about you, why don't you introduce yourself to the podcast and our listeners?
Yeah, I'm always a little bit wary of expert because for me, listening is much more of a practice, and that you actually get better at it the more you do it. And you're never going to be the master, the ultimate master in it, because there'll always be someone who says, you call yourself the listener, as my partner will do at different times. But for me, I've realized later on in life that listening is the gift that I've had for a long time and never realized it. And it was only through someone pointing that out to me, saying, you're really good at listening. Oh, I not appreciated it, which is often the case with your own gifts. And that was when I came up with the idea of the listener. It was, the original thought was the listening coach, but that had more of a fixing element to it. But the listener, and I see the listener in three parts. The first is people want to feel heard. And the phrase I use is people are dying to be heard, literally and figuratively. And even more so as we're in this sort of global pandemic. People are feeling isolated, lonely, rise in mental health conditions, rise in suicide and the like. So just having someone that will listen so they feel heard, they feel valued, that they feel matter, really makes a difference. The second part is that the quality of any of our attention with another actually improves the quality of their thinking. They start to settle, the mind rushing going on, and the adrenaline and sometimes the fight or flight settles and settles and settles. And then we start to think better. And the fact that I don't interrupt while you're thinking, and I maintain the contact with you when you go away. I call this is going away to think. So I may move away from your face to think, but when I come back and you're looking at me, I'm not allowed. It enables my thinking to continue without interruption. But if I return to you and you're looking at your watch, my thought gets interrupted. It's saying, oh, have I overstayed my welcome? Has he got to go? Or anything like that. And suddenly, where did that thought go? So that's the third. So the second one, as in the more attention I give, the better you think. And the third is people realize that actually they're only hearing most of the time. But very few of us really know how to listen. And it is a skill that can be taught. But I think when you've been taught how to listen, you can then go to another level below that, which is about being a listener. And that feels very different. And it sits with the other person. It's about being with, it's empathic, it's deep, it's meaningful. And it's like, so just to ask you two very quick questions, and really whatever comes up. When you're in the presence of a great listener, how do you know? What is it that's going on? And then the second question that goes with that is, how does that feel for you when you're in the presence of a great listener?
Would you like me to answer that? Is that what
yeah?
Oh, sure.
And in fact, anyone who's listening to this can almost like press pause and think, how would I know? And what would that feel like?
See, the cheeky boy in me was sitting there going, I just want to drop a pun like, I'm sorry, can you say that again? I wasn't listening.
Yes. Or what?
So,
agreed.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't let that one go.
No, absolutely.
So how do you, your first part of your question was, how do you know when you're in the presence of a great listener?
Yeah.
I think it's body language and it's emotion. There's something transacting between the two people or the groups of people. I think sometimes people lean in. They sort of cock the ear one way, as if, you know, it's almost like, oh, I want to hear that more deeply. There's something going on that you don't always know what it is, but there's something telling you that, oh, this person or these people are actually listening to me. And I think that's one thing. I think the other is often when people are listening, they give you the space to speak. So you don't interrupt. You don't try and talk over because you want your point of view to be heard, but you actually kind of sit back and listen and create the space for the thoughts and the ideas to drop.
Beautiful.
The second part, how does it make you feel, or is that?
Yeah. How do you feel when you're in the presence of a great listener?
Yeah, I'm thinking about people that I've had conversations with, and in family settings or work settings, and I think for me my observation is you feel a sense of belonging into that moment and that conversation. You know you're allowed to be there, and so you've got permission to say things and voice things that perhaps, if that person wasn't listening, they were maybe demanding or accusing or explaining, not listening. Then perhaps you wouldn't find that space and that permission to actually to say things. See, this podcast interview is going terribly now. You've turned into the listener and started asking.
I would. One of the things that I would do now, if I was in, and I'd say something like, "And what more?"
Okay, right.
And it continues it enables you to. It's almost like the opposite of being interrupted. Even though I've said some words, the brain goes, "Oh, you want me to say some more?" Mm. And what happens then is that the second wave of thinking arrives. Mm. So you might go, "Oh," and then you start talking again. And often the first, this in a marketing term, top of mind. So often when we ask someone a question, the first things that come out are the stuff that they always talk about. So, Stuart, tell me a little bit about what you do or how you got it. Right. Let me just bring that down, send it out. And if I said, "And what more?" Oh, nobody asked me that. They always seem to be quite happy with my first wave of thinking. The second one, gosh, nobody asked that. And I would ask that second or third or fourth or fifth time until eventually you say, actually, no, there's nothing more. And occasionally, the person you're speaking to leans in and says, actually, I've never told anyone this before. And then it comes out. And you can see that in leadership work, because their people start to tell them things that they don't normally speak about because it feels safe now. Salespeople find that clients or prospects tell them more than they would normally do because you're interested. You're not interrupting. The description you shared beautifully, which is you create this space for them to talk into. Mm. And so often the prospect and clients say more, and we can use it in relationships, in our partners or our children, encouraging them to say more and to open up more. And the more we do it, the more that relationship develops. It's quite beautiful.
It is, isn't it? It is.
Yeah. So thank you for your thoughts on that.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm reminded actually from many years ago when I was a young marketer in a previous life, and we were learning and being trained in qualitative research methods and particularly focus groups and small groups or one-on-one interviews, and I remember at the time the trainer and expert would always say that silence is the greatest question. And if
bravo, yes,
a beautiful, beautiful line, and it always stuck with me, and I've always practiced it. And really, what they were trying to teach us was that if you're in that qualitative moment and you're listening because you're trying to research and understand, if you just actually say nothing, the people that will be the most uncomfortable will have something to say in about 15 seconds. 2 or 3 people will be very uncomfortable, and they'll just blurt out what's true. And that's actually the research that you're trying to get to. The stuff they've said before that is really the hyperbole or the thing they think you want them to say.
Beautiful.
But when they actually kind of just blurt it out, it's there's the truth moment. So I'm interested, just to shift gears slightly, because some of our listeners, no pun intended there, probably going, okay, a listening coach. Who would ever hire a listening coach? Why? How does Colin earn a crust? Who's hiring Colin as a listening coach, and what kinds of problems are you solving inside an organization?
It's the sort of people I work with. It's a mixture of, as you would expect, individuals, but also teams and leaders, managers, etc. But it's also, so there's a work aspect of it. There's also a personal aspect of it. And what's lovely is that when you go back to the answers that you were giving, we know how to listen, but we don't. And so in organizations, part of the issues that they're struggling with is actually the teams are not working particularly well. And I can go back to not the work I did, but when England were in I think it was the World Cup, maybe the last time or the time before that, whatever it was, the team seemed to be playing for each other much more, and they seemed happier. And one of the reasons was that they'd engaged an HR type person who was also a psychiatrist. And what she did is she engaged them in listening to each other. So she was doing her listening, but she got them to open up and share more with each other. And so they created a much safer environment. People were more trusting of each other. We could share things. We could show up. I call it share up, speak up, and speak out, which often doesn't happen in organizations. I could say it to this person, but not to this person. And often those leaders who allow that, what you said, that space to sit with them and know that what they say really matters. And when we were talking just a little bit earlier, the bit that underlies the qualitative research is about the intention. If it's genuinely trying to get the best out of the interviewee, if you like, or the focus group, rather than how can we con them, and this is true in sales, in leadership, if the intention feels right, and again, you said it, we may not know what this is, but it feels right. So that's one side of it, is how do we build psychological safety? How do we increase the quality and the depth of listening that we do across the whole business? Because when we do that, we get better ideas, we get better decision making and things like that. So there's that bit, there's the team building bit, there's the psychological safety bit. Another bit is that we're seeing at the moment a lot more people leaving organizations. And some of the research suggests that a lot of people leave their organization because actually their boss doesn't listen. And believe it or not, I was in a small group with 3 other ladies, and each of them had left their organization because, and this is before COVID, because they weren't heard by their boss. And one of the things they wanted to do was actually have more flexible working, bizarrely. But they left because they didn't feel heard and they didn't feel valued, or their reasons were acceptable. So it's a mix of things. The other one comes up is you end up with more discretionary thinking. People feel part of the organization. They belong. They feel like they belong. So if we feel we're part of, we're included, we belong, we feel better. When we feel better, we settle. Back to where we started about settling the mind. It means that we can make decisions better because our thinking is better, and we value each other. There's a lot, and a bit of a ramble, but I hope that helps.
But that's really, really insightful, and I think so often we value maybe harder edge skills, the capacity to write a presentation or produce a spreadsheet or close a deal, or things that are very, very tangible inside organizations.
Yeah.
But actually, this skill of listening is fundamental. It's a foundational skill to
beautiful. Yes.
To every aspect of the organization, whether you're in sales or finance or leadership and management or product development. It's a core foundational skill that is often maybe just put to the side, or gosh, I've got to go to another workshop or lunch and learn on listening, and it doesn't feel. And I don't mean this disrespectfully at all. In fact, I think it's a skill we often undervalue and underestimate because we think we do it every day.
You've nailed it. Absolutely 100% nailed it. That's the challenge I face. If people believe they listen, but in fact they hear. And it's only when we know the difference, they go, because the real difference is that hearing is passive. So you and I could be in a very noisy restaurant, deep in conversation, and someone goes, "Hey, Stuart," not even talking to you, you'll hear it. I probably won't. And it's one of the reasons they say we don't sleep particularly well in a new hotel room, because all the noises are different. And so it's passive. You don't have to do anything, and it's about keeping you safe. Listening is active. You have to intend to listen. Okay. So if I played a piece of music and I just let you hear it, you'd hear it. If I say, well, this time listen to the piano, listen to the drums, you'd hear it different. Then I say, same piece of music, listen to the vocals, just listen to him singing, or, this singing. And then the fourth time I say, just let it wash through you, just be with all of it. I've been accused of changing the music.
I'm actually
seriously.
I can totally relate to this. I remember this was quite recent. I took a long weekend for my wife and I had our 20th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we were in our state was in lockdown during the pandemic, so we couldn't do the fancy boat ride down European rivers or whatever. And we ended up at a resort by the beach, which is hardly it's not a problem whatsoever. Right? At a resort by the beach, the kids were with the in-laws, and Saturday afternoon, I think we had a bottle of Pimm's, how very English, by the pool, under the umbrellas, and I put my headphones in, and we were both sitting on these banana lounges, kicking back for the first time in felt like forever, and I just hit playlist on my iPhone, listening to some music in the sunshine, and I was not asleep, I was out, but I was in the music, and for the first time, I'm like, I'm hearing the bass lines, I'm hearing the harmonies. I can see what the guitar's doing. I can see how they've layered that, and I'm a hack musician. I love music.
Yeah.
But the world was spinning around me, but it had kind of stopped, and I'm just in these great songs that obviously the Apple was spinning up for me through my iPhone, and I was in it. And an hour and a half later, my wife, who was reading a book next to me, said, should we go for a swim, or should we get up? And I'm like, and like it was like time had stopped because I was listening. It was another day. And so I'm really kicking into gear into what you're saying there.
That is so on it. Yes. You really, so there was no other interruption for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No 3-year-old taking a shirt.
Yeah. But that's the difference when we really do listen, as opposed to it. So I've got music in the background. I'll just do my emails. And another track has gone by and you didn't even notice. And I'll imagine you also heard the words maybe for the first time.
Yes. You're hearing lyrics that you would just flying over your head before. So how, I mean, and what was startling to me was when I kind of came out of that, I was like, wow, I haven't listened to music like that in like 10 years, to being so long. So clearly I hadn't been listening for like a long time. So
yes.
If that's a measure on my life as a listener, I'm barreling along at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so what can we do as leaders and managers? What can help us become aware of the problem, and what kinds of things can we put in place in conversations or moments to start to solve the problem?
So if I've understood that, there's almost like two parts: identifying the problem,
yes,
and then what can we do about the problem?
Yes. So to clarify, I think a lot of listeners on the podcast might be going, I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
I bet they do. Listen up.
Yes. So, I mean, I think the first one is identifying problems is achieved through good listening. We create that space that you talked about. We're able to be there with the person. We make it really clear that we're here to listen. So we haven't got our mobile near us.
Okay.
We haven't got our screen up. We've got nothing in between us. Our body language is open. We're paying them attention.
Okay.
And they feel it. So they feel safe to share. We do the and what more. And little by little they go, actually, I can now explain the problem. If
somebody's listening to the podcast, sorry to
interrupt. Go on.
And they're thinking, no, I listen really well. So I'll just replay what you've just said there. The last time they maybe had a conversation, now a little bit difficult on Zoom because you're going to have a screen up, but let's say you're in a live environment. Yeah. Did you maybe turn around from your desk? Did you step back and speak to them not over a desk, but nothing in between? So I'm trying to sort of play a scene out, because I can just think of many times when I've been sitting at my desk working and somebody across the room says, "Oh, Stu, what do you think about this?" And I'll throw away a comment, but I haven't stopped, I haven't turned, I haven't sat, I haven't engaged.
Yes.
So these are the cues we should be looking for.
I think one of the big messages I give people, say, is there almost like, is it perfect? Where is it different? And it depends. So in that situation, you're working away and they shout something to you and you respond back, fine. It doesn't require listening, because you've heard it. It's about, I'm listening to, or either I'm hearing to respond.
Okay. Yep.
If I really want, if they say, Stu, I've got to go because something's happened at home. And you go, oh yeah, okay, fine, off you go. You've not heard them. Mm. You might turn around and say, is everything okay? And they go, actually, yeah, the little one's whatever, or she's called out of school, or any number of those issues. And it might be very short, and you might even then just say, look, give us a call when you're back home. I'd like to know that everything's okay. Mm. Then they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel that their life matters to you. Mm-hmm. And in reality, and I don't mean this all you've done is listened rather than just heard. So, so sometimes when your partner says, yeah, of course you can go down to the pub, do they really mean that? Or are they really saying, I'd like you to stay here? Where they're just trotting it out and we're not really listening to them.
How can, that's really good. And I might have just jumped ahead a little bit, and the two parts to that earlier question was, what can leaders and managers do to help become aware of their listening problem? So maybe they're not listening well. And secondly, what could they do as leaders and managers in their organisation with their team to listen better? What skills could we give them here that they could take away with?
And I think, I call myself a listener, but I didn't hear your question correctly. So I misheard that. And it's, how do they understand that they've got a listening problem?
Yes.
All right. So the response to that is is one of that people don't tell you. People are not telling you what's really going on. That's probably the biggest one. I'm not hearing it. They're telling me what I want to hear, and they're holding back. And I hear rumors of other things, and I think everything seems to be okay at this level, but I'm hearing odd things from others that's not right. So, so they're not opening up. They give you short answers. They're more likely to agree with what you've said.
Okay.
So, and it's not really an organization. You're hiring people to tell you what you said. Yes, so that's that bit. Some things that to
pick up on that, there is, if people are telling you what you think you want to hear, or if you're just hearing back from your team members what you've told them, it's probably likely there's a listening problem going on, because they're not voicing constructively critical or different or differing views that would challenge the moment.
Yeah. And also they're less interested in you, because if you're starting to be interested in them, they can be interested in you. And so a phrase I often use is listen first, listen always. So you can be that first. So when the leader walks in and says, hey guys, we've got a problem, this is what I think. The answer is, what do you think? Versus, hi guys, we've got a problem. I'm really interested in your views. And not saying what they think. Because when they do, they come up with all these ideas. It might be that the best idea is one somebody else has got, which happens to be the same as yours. Why not let them have it?
Of course.
Brilliant, John. Really good. That's the one we're going with. Everyone feels valued and heard because their ideas have been put into the pot. And it's much better that way. And in fact, Tom Peters, he of In Search of Excellence from the 70s, I'm showing my age, he says that if he was running an MBA, the first part of it would be this strategic listening for everyone. And the second part would be more strategic listening for everyone. That's how he sees listening. Yeah. It's that important. And it is that foundation that you talk about. So the sort of things which we've touched on is, no distractions, attention to them, look as though you're listening, feel like you're listening to them, intend to listen to them, to hear what they've got to say, not how can I get from them as a result of it. Because that getting from, when they turn to you and they say, you know what, Stu, that's it, you've got it. Then you know you've got rapport. And then you know that you can influence them as long as that intention is good throughout.
Are there any really good examples in the public space, politicians, leaders, sportsmen, commentators, that you could point to and go, actually, they're very good at this skill? I'm putting you on the spot right here now.
Oh, gosh. There's none that, I have to be honest, there are none that immediately come to mind. That's an interesting one, because it's never a question. Nobody's ever asked me that question.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe, and I can't even remember his name now, some of those long-term recent English talk show hosts.
So Michael Parkinson, David Frost. Yeah. It's in some respects, Oprah is good at listening.
Okay.
Actually. And she sees, in fact, she tells a story when she's being interviewed. This is probably a very good point, actually, when you talk about people in the public space. And she says that I've probably interviewed, she said thousands of people, from presidents to prisoners, right. From single mums to people on their deathbed or children. And she said pretty much every single one of them at the end of the interview, and bear in mind it's anyone, they lean across me and they say, was that okay? Did I do all right? And so once she'd realized that, she said, I now intend through my interviews to validate them in terms of what they're saying throughout. And so her whole being is about listening to them so that they feel heard, they feel valued, validated, and important.
And that's really interesting. And then obviously they share things that perhaps they wouldn't share with other interviewers.
The quality of feels safe.
Comes out, and it's a better program, and everybody wins. How interesting! No, that was certainly a curveball question right there.
That's because I asked you a question earlier. All right.
So, if I'm a CEO, leader, or boss, what should I look out for? What should I look out for across my team to go, actually, I think we should get somebody in to help us with this. What are the symptoms or signs to go, actually, we've got some issues. Let's get somebody in to come and help us.
I think it really goes back to the point you made very early on, is that listening itself is the foundation for communication. Mm-hmm. We all think it's about if it's about speaking or writing and things like that, but actually it is about listening. And so if we're finding in the team that the team is not functioning well, it may well be an issue with communication. Is there lots of groups within the main team, and even more so on Zoom, because often the meetings that we have are very prescriptive, right? What's going well? Where do you need help? Let's do it. What's the plan for next week? Done. Rather than understanding a bit more about each other. So on arrival, how are you arriving? How are you feeling today? What's it like for you being isolated or whatever? Because some people work from home on their own. That's it. There's no one else there. So it is a bit more about the disconnection and the miscommunications that are going on. It doesn't feel safe, as I said earlier, to share. We're looking outside for how to build trust, when actually, because I think there was one bank CEO said, how do we get trusted more? And somebody said, no, that's not the question. The question is, how can we be more trustworthy? Which is very different. And I think from the work I've done is that listening is at the heart of so many of these things in communication.
What's been your greatest success as a listening coach and helping strategic leaders in small, big and large organisations really change their behaviours? What's one or two moments that you can think back on and go, that's been change-worthy?
The best moments for me happen in one-to-one conversations. There's two parts. One is in the one-to-one, is when you ask the man what more, and what more, and what more, and they go, oh my God, I've just come up with a thought that I never knew I had, and I'm really going to take that away now. So there's almost like this joy in their face that they've something's opened up for them, and they've thought it. But in fact, the piece I've done is to create that space, if you like, for them to open up to it. And the other moments are when you get either in a team which works together, or even I've seen this in a public event where there was a couple together, and it's the first time that the other person has been asked, first of all, what do you think? What do you want to say? And that they felt heard. And occasionally you end up with tears coming down their face because it's the first time they've felt heard. I've been in organizations where it's difficult to give positive feedback to someone you work with.
Wow.
Yeah. They found that very, very uncomfortable. It wasn't even negative feedback. So little by little, as they start to build that trust, then they can start to share the things that are important. And another one is about appreciation. And we're often, we give feedback. So, Stuart, we're going to give you feedback from the last month's work. And you're just waiting for the bits that, this didn't go well, right? So it's got a mix. Whereas if we give you appreciation, so one thing I appreciate about you, Stuart, from me to you today, is the way you've actually listened, you've reflected back for me, And I have felt heard throughout it. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's about your being, not your doing. So leaders can appreciate that, but they're appreciating the individual's being, not what they've done. So it might be they appreciated the commitment they made to the organization by coming in over the weekend. They're not appreciating what they did, but the who they are that was committed to come in.
What I'm hearing there is that the leader is purposefully validating the individual, and through that validation, creating that safety and that belonging and that space to then have the positive and or the negative conversations around performance or improvement or outcomes, and so that they feel validated and belonged. That's not the right word. They feel a sense of validation and belonging. Before you actually can work on any performance improvement, which sounds to me foundational, which is really interesting.
Yeah, very good point. And you picked it up very well.
What's the one thing as a leader I could do, any of our listeners could do as leaders going into work tomorrow?
The top one would be stop trying to fix things. So I'm here to listen. I want to encourage you to come up with the ideas rather than expect me to come up with all the ideas. So no fixing. And I would use pausing, which we touched on, and silence. I would encourage them to say more. And the other is to really give them your attention.
Fantastic. Colin, what a really interesting topic. And I've just so enjoyed our conversation today. It's been really insightful. Where can people reach out to you, read your books or resources, or work with you? Tell people where they can go to get more about you.
Yeah, so the website is www.dexteritysolutions.co.uk, DEXTERITY solutions.co.uk. And whilst I don't have my own book, I have a chapter in this book called The Journey Inside, Coaching to the Core.
Excellent.
And it's on Amazon, and actually before Christmas, it's on Kindle for 99 pence, just under £1.
Wow, that's quite a bargain. Co-writer, contributor into the book called, remind us of the title of that.
So it's called The Journey Inside. Coaching to the Core. And my chapter is chapter 3, and it's called The Transformational Impact of Active Listening. And it shows the journey, the relationship framework.
Colin, real pleasure. Wish you the very best in your consulting. Listeners, if you want to reach out and know more, head over to dexteritysolutions.co.uk and feel free to subscribe, tell your friends about Leadership Talk, subscribe on podcasts. We want to thank you. Ask us any questions on our social links. Jump onto LinkedIn, look up waymaker.io, ask any questions. And we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to another time when we can help you be inspired through strategy, leadership, and technology on Leadership Talk.